And especially never go to an employer with the threat of, if you don't get it or something doesn't happen in a timely manner, you're going to look elsewhere. That could be absolutely detrimental for your current employment and definitely for your future employment if you keep doing stuff like that. We've had a couple employees that have been with us for a decent amount of time, and we've put a lot of responsibility on them over and above what I guess we're currently paying them for. They're doing a great job for us. You would have more experience with that, but you're communicating to me that they are. So again, I want to reiterate this type of thing because a lot of people in the comments, especially on social media, and a lot of what people think is that like I'm a slave driver, which is not at all the case. I reward good work. The one thing that, and I've talked to you about this, the one thing that I feel I'm a little bit behind the curve on is the rate of growth of the business. And as a result, employee compensation is growing, and I'm not used to seeing these figures yet.
Right.
I'm also not used to seeing these figures when I don't have direct control or insight on the value that specific people are bringing. Yeah. But you are communicating it to me.
Yeah.
And I'm totally on board with it.
I think one of the approaches that so for anyone listening that's like an employee for like another company, I think one of the approaches that people have that is just not a good approach to have is when you're like, oh, inflation is increasing the cost of living, therefore I deserve a raise.
Yeah, no.
From a business's perspective, it's so hard to make any sort of decision based on that and that alone, because that's just not how business owners and management, whatever you want to call it, make their decisions. They look at it as being, okay, are you providing more and more value regardless of cost of living and inflation and all that kind of stuff? Like, are you providing more value to the business? Yeah. And I think that's the approach that you and I agree on, and kind of like that we're trying to implement more and more moving forward, is basing
Keep going. Just light here a little bit.
is basing the kind of like future compensation of employees on their performance. And so if you're able to, as an employee, keep track of any sort of data about how you're improving the company, whether it is over X period of time I did this, and this, which helped increase the business by this, or also really important, I did this and this project, I oversaw such and such project, which saved the company this amount of money. If you're able to do those things and you have like this actual statistical proof that then you can bring to your superior or your owner or whatever, and you're able to show, but with data, like, it's so much easier for then the person to make that decision.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's one of the things that, so I had a conversation today, for example, where I mentioned that moving forward, we're going to be starting to implement a much more structured, like, annual performance review, where it's everyone knows, hey, this is the time that it's going to be coming up at, so you don't have to feel like awkward, and when you're approaching your manager, being like, when should I start talking about this when it comes to that I'm looking for higher pay.
And I can also see how that particular employee, in that kind of situation would maybe get a little bit aggressive with their approach, right? If there's not a set date where they know it's coming up, they know how to address things, and maybe even something in terms of, again, I've said this multiple times, never go to your employer and come out and say, listen, I deserve a raise. This is what I want. It's not a good, even if you're providing a lot of value, what that does? That puts up a wall with your employer. It's an aggressive approach, and I'm not saying don't be aggressive. That's not what I'm saying. I think that if you offer enough value, I truly do think that you should push the envelope a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. But I also think that you should, number one, be realistic. And number two, I think that you should have the approach of, here's my target. I know I'm doing this for the business. This is happening for the business. This is happening, just like what you mentioned. Like come with like actual data to back up your claim or your desire, right? And then also ask the question, is there something that I can be doing more over and above what I'm already doing in order for me to be earning that amount? And maybe there's nothing else, and maybe you are deserving of it. Maybe you're hustling so hard that there's nothing, you're going to get the raise or whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, never go to an employer and, demand it. And especially never go to an employer with the threat of, if you don't get it or something doesn't happen in a timely manner, you're going to look elsewhere. That could be absolutely detrimental for your current employment and definitely for your future employment if you keep doing stuff like that. It's not a good look. And it really starts to dwindle the I guess the thought of loyalty that, for example, for me, for me, loyalty is very important. I'll take loyalty over skill all day long, because I think if somebody's loyal and hardworking, I think we've also seen loyalty and not hardworking and lazy. We've also seen loyalty and laziness. That's not a good mix. I'll take loyalty and hardworking over skill all day long.
Or like education.
I'll take all
a lot of
that.
Other employers value that a lot.
For sure. You got to think. A lot of our top end employees have zero education. Like fucking zero. Multiple of them have come from temp agencies. Dave, I don't even know what the fuck that guy was doing before. Like he does. I don't care. You get what I mean? It doesn't matter to me. Connor, I don't think he went to school. Right? I know fucking Dave didn't. Right? None of these guys have post-secondary. You have post-secondary. That's about it.
I'm really probably the only exception.
Minus, a lot of the engineering students that we have.
True.
Right? But they're not in high-level positions. Right? But
I definitely think, actually, I think it set the foundation. And see, here, there's a difference between, so just going through, like, even before starting to work with you, going through, like, the job, like, application world, because, like, it's been a fucking long time since you've ever applied for a job.
Oh, boy.
Like, actually, what was the last, like, job you think you applied for? This would be a funny short clip.
Oh, man.
Like, last actual job you applied for
the produce clerk at Zares.
Wow.
Yeah, I would have to say. I don't even think I applied for my my GM job because my dad worked there. So it was hey, is he in school? Yes. Okay.
Bring him
He's in. Is he of age? Bring him in. And that's pretty much it.
But yeah, so going through whatever a couple of years ago, like that if you have like a Stanford MBA, like that in and of itself, they'll value. They don't give a fuck about your loyalty, or they don't give a fuck about hard working and all that kind of stuff. Like on their initial interviewing process, right? Where they put so much on that. And what's funny is me kind of now like working for a couple of years in more of like this kind of role. I'm seeing how that doesn't matter fucking like whatsoever. Now, what I learned in school is definitely very valuable.
I was going to say,
but in terms of like the actual, had I not graduated, had I just learned the shit, not graduated, so I didn't have a fucking like whatever degree behind it, but I learned the shit, it would be just as valuable than the degree and the
here's what I think is very different.
Of the school.
Yeah, here's what I think is very different about your situation is that you have an MBA, but you also understand how to put it to use. I think a lot of people lack.
I don't think I knew how to do that right away, though. I think it took exposure to problems in the business to then me be like, oh, wait, I learned about this thing before. I remember learning about this or that or whatever, and I'd bring up an idea, and it started mixing the practical with the...
And here's the thing, too. I think it's a little bit different where, like you have like Bain Consulting or whatever. I think a big differentiating factor is, somebody that, for example, my buddy that works for Bain or whatever he works for now, he'll go into businesses and he'll identify issues and help the current management overcome those issues or whatever, but only by giving them the theory. Yeah. You have an active role by taking these issues, applying the theory to it, but seeing it through with action. Yeah. I think that that's a very different application of what you've learned. Yeah. And I don't think a lot of people are able to do stuff like that. And I think maybe the reason why when you came in here and was like, there's a little bit of a learning curve is because it's real fucking life. Yeah. It's very different. Yeah. It's very different. The stresses are very different. It's not like just fucking school. It's very different. Yeah, I think
the two pieces that they don't cover in an MBA program that has way more impact in everyday whatever execution of these ideas or problem solving is one would be the complexity of the labor force, of the emotions and the motivations and the interactions that everyone has. Like that plays such a strong your company culture, such a strong role on how things are executed long term. And I think the second thing that, and like they don't like, they cover it in like, everyone, I was literally going to ask you, feel good about shit. Like they cover company culture. It's a horrible approach to company culture. It's so unrealistic because human emotion is way more complex and so much more. You have to base it on like intuition and actually just adapting on the fly to you have to be so fucking adaptable because the approach with one person is very different from the approach with another person is very different with the approach to another person.
Think about this. Think about the economy at different times, different points in time. When were those fucking books written? Yeah. Right? Think about that. Think about how far behind that is. Like, do they talk about what company culture is like during a recession, during a boom cycle? Yeah. Do they talk about different, different types of demographics that start to grow in your organization? Do they talk about that? Because those cultures are different, right? So certain things are very different. Like I don't think that it's not exactly. You have to be so adaptable. Yeah. Yeah. I was literally going to ask you that if you learned how to deal with people in your MBA, which is literally Master of Business Administration.
Yeah. I'd say the second piece that the MBA fails to like really like when to separate just theory to the actual execution of it is how many things can a business actually do and take on and change at any one given time. Right? There's so many ideas that you can have that would be able to help change a business. I think one of the things that, and I feel like one of the reasons why my role is so integral in the company is the ability to understand how an idea or a change that we want to do, how that affects every other fucking part of the business, right? And all the possible trickling effects that can come from it. Because I feel like, especially if you, like, I would imagine bringing in a consulting company into, let's say, like our business here. They'd come up with all these ideas and everything, but it's like, okay, there's all the ideas, but if we were to then start doing all of that, what would then be all of the trickling effects of things that would come down the road that you actually don't really know unless you're in the weeds of the business every single fucking day. We spent about an hour this morning talking about all the product launches that we want to do over the next, call it, year. And we're trying to be so fucking strategic with implementing quite a few new products, but also not doing so many to the point where we just get nothing done. Because we've gone through phases before in the past of that, of where we're almost trying to have too much that's not organized, that then nothing ends up happening.
Or it's poorly executed. Right? And so we want to have it where like any of these new product launches are really strongly executed. They have a lot of marketing and advertising around it. And in order to properly execute on that, there's like so many pieces to the puzzle that you have to be a few months in advance to properly execute on it. And so getting all that set up in time and knowing that, okay, if we do this big change in the company, that's going to also impact this. It's also going to impact this. And how do they all interact with one another? And I think that's one of the pieces that the implementation of it all was, I think, one piece that, one of the
last thing about the MBA, and then we can move on. A big part of the MBA is what's called case studies. You've probably heard of that before. A case study essentially is you read about a complicated problem, and you come up with you analyze a problem. You kind of get to the root cause. You show all the different options that you can do to solve a problem, and then you give your recommendation and an implementation plan. That's the structure of a case study. Yeah. The implementation plan, which in the reality of business is the biggest aspect of doing any of these sorts of changes, is usually one fucking small paragraph at the end of like a 10-page case study, right? It's just so interesting that the main part of a case study and what you learn about in an MBA is the analysis of it all, right? Okay, we fucking looked at every single politically, how does this impact this possible change? Economically, how does this impact this possible change? From the supplier relationships, how does it impact the possible change? So you analyze all of it, and then you come through all the different options. You come up with your recommendation for what the option is. But then once again, the implementation is just a small fucking part right at the very end. And you're like, oh, and this is step by step how you do it. But it's fucking 5 bullet points and you call it a day.
That's exactly what I was mentioning is like, Brandon,
yeah,
my buddy there, the consultant, he'll go like that's what he'll do.
Yeah,
he'll and then it's like, okay, here's my 5-step process, and you're like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
like how do you do it?
Yeah,
it's very different. It's so different, man. Like business can't be bullet pointed on a paper.
Yeah,
it's just so different.
That's where I could see. Now I don't really know much about the actual like consulting world, but I would imagine that really good consulting companies would then also do that part as well. Where
they very well might.
Yeah, where they have experience,
or there might be certain
through the implementation.
Yeah, there might be certain levels of it, but I know that. I'm pretty sure. Like last time I spoke, I haven't talked to him in a while, but last time I spoke to him, it was like that was like the approach was he goes in, analyzes things, provides recommendations, and bounces.
Yeah. So to kind of bring this full circle to go back to the talk about compensation and everything moving forward. So when I had a conversation with our general manager today, essentially what I told him is that moving forward, I want to have a different approach to conversations about compensation with everyone. And so how I envision it going is where there's a particular... And I also explained to him that the reason why any sort of impromptu conversations about compensation are complicated and take a while is because it's not just that one employee. I can imagine that as one employee, if you're going to your manager or supervisor or owner or whatever, asking for, let's say, a raise, you would think of it as just being you think of it being just a finite conversation that it should be just yes or no and move on, right? But that conversation is never that simple. Because if you imagine, like we have over 100 people on payroll across the different businesses, right? And it's growing quite quickly. If you imagine that every single person approached you once a year, that's literally 2 people a week spread out through the entire year having that conversation. Each one requires a financial analysis. It requires a breakdown of your budget. How much can you actually afford paying people? How does that impact future hires? How does that impact as the large expenses are coming in your business that are maybe not human capital related? Maybe you're buying new machinery. Maybe you're going through a big move, whatever it is. And how does that impact your budget? Like there's so many parts to it that's never just like, oh, yeah or no, yes or no, right? And so I said moving forward, the approach that I want to have is we're starting with, okay, here's our employee budget. Here's how much we can spend for the year. Like that's it. Like no more than this, and we have to stick within it. Then from there, who are the people that we currently have? And let's do a performance analysis of how they're doing. Then any future changes in compensation, either higher, lower, or staying the same, is strictly based on their previous performance sticking then within that budget. So it's never just like, oh, like one off here, one off there, one off there. It's like, okay, here's the budget. Here's all of the employees. We only have this amount of resources that we can spread across these different employees. So if we have somebody that's really performing phenomenally and they deserve quite a bit more, that either then means that we have to get rid of the lower performers or to consolidate, or we have to not give raises out to some of the people that are just doing the status quo. Like if you're coming in every single day and just doing the status quo, then you're going to keep getting paid the status quo. If you are underperforming, you're either going to, now I don't know if like from an Employment Standards Act, if you can actually like lower somebody's pay, I actually have to like double check that. Or like you would likely be laid off because you're an underperformer. Right. And so I think that structuring it that way, we're approaching it.
Let go. I don't know that you could lay off. Layoffs are.
Oh, that's true. That's like a temporary terminology. Yeah. So let go.
Yeah.
And I think with that approach, not only does it help, let's say, for example, you and I on any of these sort of compensation conversations, but it also helps kind of like everyone moving forward that they know that their compensation is going to be based on merit and merit alone.
I don't understand why people have such a hard time with that. It's unreal to me. I honestly don't understand it. In what world do we live in where people think that they just deserve what they deserve, maybe even based on time spent in the company,
that's
seniority?
Actually, yes. So that's actually a point you mentioned earlier that I was going to go back on, but you were kind of like took it somewhere else. Is I think another big aspect of working hard in a company and how that relates to your compensation is that sometimes you almost, as an employee, you have to have the self-awareness to understand, okay, am I just being busy and just being busy,
mm-hmm.
or am I actually working on the shit that has the most value to the business,
mm-hmm.
right? Because it's very easy as an employee to just start doing a bunch of tasks that either one, are not actually the priority of the business whatsoever. Two, you're spending a disproportionate amount of time on tasks that are of less importance or have a lower ROI. Or three, maybe it's an outdated task that we don't even fucking want to do anymore,
mm-hmm.
right? I've seen that before of someone spending time on something that I'm like, I don't even want to do that anymore. We got rid of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't spend any more time on that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very easy to get caught up in busy work. That's also kind of ties into why I want to do a lot more oversight and management of kind of everyone's daily task list and scheduling it that way. Yeah. So I can see, okay, are people actually doing the things that have the highest ROI for the
mm-hmm.
business? Because then it also sets the stage for being able to have a better compensation conversation in the future,
mm-hmm.
because we're like, okay, you actually have done a really high performance on the things that matter the most and have the biggest ROI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You get paid based on merit. I mean, I don't know. I don't know why people have such a hard time understanding that, and why, people are, up in arms when I say that.
Yeah.
Like, do you want the business to go out of business? Is that what you want? Because that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make more money, you have to offer the business more value in order for it to make more money.
Yeah. Now, historically, have there been situations where employers have taken advantage of their employees and had brutal working environments? Yes, that has happened in history. And should there be
history? Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Maybe that, and I'm sure that still does happen. Don't get me wrong. I'm not oblivious to this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that. But why the fuck are you still there if you offer a lot of value? Like, seriously, if you truly think that you offer a lot of value, but you're not getting paid for what you believe you're offering, then fucking bounce. If you are that good, somebody will pay you what you want.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Fact of the matter is, you're shit.
Mm-hmm.
You don't deserve it, and that's why you're still there complaining.
Yeah.
And then that's why you need the unions to back you up, because you're shit.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get paid more than what you're actually worth, and that's why I'm essentially against unions, because pretty much every single unionized position are paying their employees, a lot of their employees, way more than they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that truly have the ability to excel
mm-hmm.
are picking up other people's slack, or they're not getting paid what they should be getting paid. They should be getting paid more than the people, simply doing the status quo or even below. Mm-hmm. Listen, I've worked in unionized environments. I know exactly how this shit works.
Yeah.
Exactly how it works. And the people that do great work get fucked.
Mm-hmm.
And then those people that are capable of doing good work, they stop doing it, because why the fuck would you? It's literally socialism in a fucking micro workplace environment. Yeah. Literally. Yeah. They're robbing from, the shitty employees are robbing from the great ones, because those great ones should be getting paid more, and those shitty employees should be getting paid less. Yeah, it is what it is.
There's a TikTok trend, or not a trend, but a page that I saw once that kind of reminds me of this. There's an owner of a welding shop. Now, whether or not this is just like fabricated and made up, who knows? But nevertheless, the story definitely holds. There's an owner of a welding shop, and he has people coming in on day one for their like an interview to see if he's going to hire them, and he'll have them do an actual example of how they weld on a couple different things. And he's like, "Hey, how much are you looking for?" And they might say, "I don't know, $20 an hour." And he'll say sometimes, for example, he's like, "Okay, I'll offer you $30 an hour, and you can start tomorrow. And they're like, what the fuck? Like, why is he offering me more? But the thing is that he's looking at the quality of the work in that interview, and he's like, hey, that quality is worth $30. But then there's also other times where maybe it's an older person that's been doing it for a long time or whatever. They come in, they're like, oh, I'm looking for $30 an hour. And they do the example, and he's like, okay, I can offer you 15. That's what I can offer you. Because he directly looks at the quality of their actual welding work live in the fucking interview, and it's like, hey, this is what I can offer you. And so he's giving the offering directly based on merit and merit alone, regardless of experience, regardless of background, regardless of connections, all that kind of stuff. And so when I saw that, it's like that ideology around how to structure compensation in a company, I'm like, that's what I honestly believe in through and through. It's like, here's your quality, and this is directly what you're deserving based on that quality. Done.
The only reason why I'm here is because I had to prove myself to get here. Why should it be any different for anybody else?
Exactly.
Like, seriously.
Right? Like, you have to think, like,
the market told me that I have a valuable product.
Exactly.
And I worked really hard to get it there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go to the market and say, hey, I have an idea.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I want for it. Give me the money, and then I'll produce it. I had to produce it first.
Mm-hmm.
So show us what you're made of.
Yeah.
Show us what you're fucking made of, and you better keep performing.
Yeah. And I think people really also, like, when they hear this journey and see maybe what you have right now, like, they don't realize that this is not just like a couple of years. Even like when you and I had a conversation about like my contract a couple of weeks ago, like I told you, like, I recognize that you fucking started the business and grew it from the ground long before I came around, right? Like, I came into the picture fucking like way down into the story where you already had it going for like 10 years, that you've been consistent in and out every single fucking day, working sometimes 24 hours a day in order to, like, and you literally said that you've ended up in the hospital multiple times because of stress to try to get this business to where it is today, right? Like, I think people don't recognize all of that history and how much risk you've taken as well. Financial risk, risking your relationship.
I did risk my relationships.
Risking your relationships. Like, all of that.
I traded my relationships.
Right. And I think,
like, who's willing to do that? Like, are you willing to do that?
Exactly.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to say, hey, sorry,
yeah,
I'm doing this?
Yeah. And I think, like, that is what the world rewards, right? That is where the combination of all those things into where you got today is all of those risks and sacrifices that were made over the years, and the consistent day in and day out. That's why, like, if there's some days or whatever that you're like, oh, I want to go do this, leave early for my son's baseball game or this or that or whatever, I'm like, good. Like, you fucking deserve it, first of all. And second of all, that's why I'm fucking here. I want you to be able to, like, reap a little bit of the, now I'm not saying you don't work hard right now, like, you really still fucking work hard, but I'm saying, like, back in the day you would never do that, right? Like, you talked about missing a lot of your a lot of things in your, like, child's life, like, growing up, children's life growing up, because you're having all these sacrifices. Like, that's also a part of me right now. I'm like, I want to be able to take on a lot of the fucking things right now that you can once a week leave at a couple hours early to be able to go watch your son's baseball game, where I recognize for fucking 15 years leading up to this point in time that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that, like, that is what is the foundation for what rewards, I feel like, yourself and, like, business owners in general. And, like, I think a lot of employees might not recognize the sheer volume of what you had to go through in order to get here. Right.
Lots of shit I had to shovel.
Yeah.
A lot.